My name is Cam, and in today's video, I'll be showing you how I painted Magus from the Chrono Trigger series. I'll be showing you my entire painting process, including what paints I used, when I used them, and why I chose them. So let's get into it. For this model, I'll be skipping past the surface prep stage and jump right into priming and painting. I'll just mention that I printed this model on my Saturn IV Ultra 16K. For priming, I'm sticking with my current favorite, which is Gaia Notes Surfacer Evo in white. This surfacer has been great for me, giving my models a fantastic starting point that allows me to be precise when setting my various tones across the model. This is especially helpful for the skin tone. Which, speaking of skin tone, this was my first time painting a more fantasy-esque complexion. I had some challenges in getting this one right, particularly because the references for Magus are a little all over the place. I eventually decided to base the final look on the official illustration from Akira Toriyama. You'll notice that his skin tone is a pale gray with just a hint of blue. So I'll be leaning heavily on my underpainting layers to guide the mid-tone in that direction. Starting from my white primer, I build the shadows using cobalt violet. I did this by aiming my airbrush from below the model, essentially the opposite of where the light source would hit. This sets the foundation for my shadow placement. With the shadows established, I followed up with lavender as my highlight, this time spraying from above to mimic a top-down light source. The end result is a soft, almost mystical undertone, which is fitting for a character like Magus. With the underpainting locked in, I moved into my gray palette to dial in the midtone. First, I add an even layer of Mr. Color's Air Superiority Blue. This is a grayish blue that helps knock back the intensity of the underpainting and starts shifting everything towards my target color of a cool gray. Then, I layer in Mr. Color's IJN Gray. This color is what I would consider my main tone for the skin, so I'll apply the layer accordingly. Finally, I came in with the highlight layer using Neutral Gray 1. This will add balance to the skin tone, but provide just enough contrast to elevate the skin tone without overpowering my temperature shifts from the underpainting. As I build up each layer, I try to keep the coats light. That way, I don't bury the underpainting. The gradient I established early on should still peek through, helping shape the final tone. Now, I will say that I did lay it on heavier than I intended. But that's okay. I can bring back some of that contrast by painting lavender once again, but this time in the shadows. Finally, I seal my work thus far with Gaia Flat Clear Premium. This will protect the skin work so I can move on to masking and painting other details such as the hair. So for the masking, I finally decided to give Gaia's Masking Coat R a try. It was a bit hard to use, so I ended up adding Mr. Masking Soul Neo over top, which was a little easier to use, and it created this beautiful mess we have here. Wait a second. He looks kind of familiar. Anyway, I think once I get more experience with those products, I'll be able to do some amazing work with them. Now that the face is masked, I can paint the foundation of the hair with a similar approach to the skin tone. I started with the same cobalt violet as before when I painted the skin. Then I added Million Blue. I added a light coat of this pretty much all over the hair. Afterwards, I highlighted with Gaia's Neutral Gray 4, Neutral Gray 1, and then Lavender. Then I finished by sealing the hair with a semi-gloss varnish. Okay, moment of truth. Time to peel off the masking and pray that no touch-ups are needed. I was a little worried initially. The masking made it look a little crazy, but it matched the contours of the face perfectly. I really don't see any areas where I need to touch up. Moving on to the torso, you'll notice the model has a few different textures. There's the leather breastplate, and then this metallic armor that covers the abdomen, and of course the skin, which we just worked on. To paint the metallic armor, I need to lay down a gloss black first. That's the secret to getting the deep, reflective sheen out of your metallic paints. For the armor, my metallic paint of choice is titanium alloy from Jumpwind. Also, for this specific paint, I'm going to omit the gloss varnish I would have typically done for this. I've since learned that this metallic paint looks way better without any sort of varnish. And this paint is durable enough that there's not really any fear of it being scratched or flaking off. Now, before I move on, I did want to explain my reasoning for doing the metallic before the leather. It's much easier to mask something that's recessed than the other way around. So plan your paint job accordingly. Next, I add a new layer of primer to delete the overspray from the metallic, which gives me a blank slate to move forward with painting the leather. Now, I'm going to keep the leather pretty simple, just 2 colors. I'll start by adding red-brown in the shadows. Once my shadows are locked in, I'll paint wood brown to act as both my mid-tone and my highlight by blending it in where it meets the red-brown, but I'll increase the intensity where I think the light source would be. To help sell the leather effect, I'll seal this up with a varnish of semi-gloss. It'll also look really great next to the skin tone and metallic with the variety of sheens on this piece. There we go. 2-color leather. Let's unmask. Very nice. I'm going to keep up that momentum and move on to painting the boots and lower torso using the same method for the leather. So, quick music break.
You said I would never see you again. Maybe I would hold you then a little bit longer. I tried to memorize what you've told me, everything that you've shown me, making me stronger. Your eyes on my mind. I have tried to let you go, and I'm fighting against the tide for the chance to hold you
Now that the leather is finished and masked, I can move on to the next step for both sections. For the blue fabric waistband on the lower torso, I used cobalt violet in the shadows once again. Then I added a layer of premium ultramarine with an attempt to preserve some of that cobalt violet for added depth. This gave the waistband such a deep blue. I really love how this part turned out. Now, before painting the metallic, same as the upper torso, I have to start with the gloss black. The one difference here will be my choice of metallic. I chose to use Mithril from Jumpwind instead of titanium alloy from before. Mithril has a brighter silver tone, which matches the reference. You'll notice that the metallic on the torso is a slightly different hue than the metallic on the rest of the model. So to win those detail points, it's important to capture that nuance, however small. Alright, once again, time to unmask. Okay, looks great. Now, onto the legs. Okay, before I move on to the legs, you'll notice that one leg has a metallic band. No, not a metal band, a metallic band. So, you know the drill. More gloss black, and mithril, and masking. Once that's done, I can delete the overspray with primer and move on to my colors. I want to build up a vibrant underpainting layer, so I'll start with wine red in the shadows. Then I'll use brilliant pink in my highlights, and for the mid-tone, I'll be using lavender. To finish the legs, I'll be using semi-gloss as my varnish of choice. I'll quickly unmask, and then I can move on to the hands and scythe. Okay, so guess what? More gloss black, more mithril, and more masking. So I'll speed through that real quick, and then I'll talk about the gloves. Before I move on to painting the gloves, it's especially important here to add another layer of white primer to cover up the black. Well, do y'all remember how I painted the leather from before? Well, I'm doing that again for the gloves. The exact same process as before. I'll do red brown, wood brown, and semi-gloss. Now, to unmask and move on to the cape. The cape is a striking shade of crimson. I want to try and establish the shadows to facilitate that through the underpainting layer. So I'll begin by painting the entire cape with one layer of wine red. But then I noticed something. The neck is also part of the cape. So now I'll need to quickly get the skin tone painted on the neck before I move on any further. I am so glad that I caught that. So I quickly recreated my skin tone and then masked it with some masking putty, which by the way is some awesome stuff. It was my first time using it and it was super quick and easy to apply and remove. I'll leave a link in the description for where I got it. Back to the actual cape, I wanted to add targeted shadows within the folds of the cape using red-brown. Then I'll paint on the mid-tone with red matter. I'll remove the masking and then finish the cape with the flat varnish. So for this next section, there's a few details I haven't gone over yet. This is where the model truly comes to life. First, I need to address the skin tone. It's almost perfect, but is a bit too blue. I'll be layering on an acrylic wash using faded green from Pro Acryl to shift the tone slightly towards green. To be clear, I really mean slightly. The paint will be super diluted. The goal is just to slightly tint the skin. Once the skin has been saturated with the wash, I'll quickly remove it. I do not want excess. Again, this was just to tint the existing skin tone. Personally, I'm pretty happy with how it turned out, so I'll move on to painting the facial details. I'll start by painting the inside of the mouth with a dark magenta. Then I'll paint the tongue pink, and then I'll paint the teeth dark ivory. Now for the best part, the eyes. For the sclera, or the whites of the eyes, I'll be using ivory. It's a perfect off-white for painting in the whites of the eyes, but as long as you don't use true white, you should be in the ballpark. For the iris, or the colorful part of the eye, I'll start by painting in burnt red. Then I'll dot in just a little bit of bold pyrrole red to give the eye color a bit more depth. Next, I'll add the pupil using coal black. This part is the scariest for me because I have shaky hands, and if I mess this up, it's hard to cover up. But so far, I've done pretty good. Now for the effect that really sells it, I'll be adding the specular highlight using bold titanium white. This is another reason you wouldn't use true white for the whites of the eyes, because it allows for the contrast of the specular highlight to punch through even more. For the outline of the eye, I'll be using dark neutral gray. Building off from what I've learned in my first two videos, I really feel like I'm getting the hang of how to use this to elevate the eyes. The last thing I'll add to the eyes is a thin layer of gloss varnish from Vallejo. The sculpt for the eyes were incredibly small, so my work was cut out for me. I was pretty nervous with how they would turn out, but I'm pretty impressed with the result. Now that the eyes are finished, I'm going to move on to the eyebrows and finishing off the hair. For the eyebrows, I'll keep those simple by painting on bright warm gray and then white blue. For the hair, you'll remember I airbrushed a range of colors already, so here I'm just dry brushing on the highlights. I'll dry brush the same colors as I did the eyebrows, so bright warm gray and white blue. Then I'll dry brush one more highlight layer with a bit of bold titanium white to push the contrast even further. Moving on down to the torso and lower torso, I need to paint the laces yellow. So if you have a hard time painting yellow, this trick will save you tons of time and layers of paint. I'll start by adding a layer of ivory onto the raised area. Once that's set, I can now comfortably and confidently layer on yellow. Oh, I forgot to mention, before I did the yellow, I also added some silver to the eyelids. To finalize the details of the figure, I'll return to the skin and add a small amount of pastel shading along the recesses of the muscle. I also added some to contour the angles of the face. For the specific color, I used a brownish green pastel. I figured this would help balance the hue of the skin by shifting it closer to green, sort of like I did with the wash. Did it work? I don't know. I'm still quite the newbie with color theory and the like, but I think it looks great. And it perfectly captures the effect that I was going for, so I'll call that a success. Almost to the finish line. I'll try to be quick with the base because I'm itching to assemble the model. For the cloud of smoke, I start by shading the shadows with lavender. Then I build up the volume using Gaia's Neutral Gray 4, focusing on the outer edges of the smoke trail, followed by Neutral Gray 3 for the midtone. Then I move on up to Neutral Gray 2 for the first highlight and Neutral Gray 1 for the brightest highlight. I'll finish by varnishing with Flat Clear Premium. For the platform, I envisioned it being this kind of ancient relic of sorts. So I'll lay down a gloss black and then meteoric iron for the main metallic paint. To add some visual interest to the platform, I added light bronze to the perimeter of the base. Then I dry brushed bright gold onto the top of the surface where these ornate raised details are. My hope was the gold would catch on to the design and not push into the recesses. I think I failed a little bit. It does look a little messy, so I'll be coming back through later to clean it up. More to come. So to sell the effect of this being some sort of ancient relic, I did some sponge chipping in silver to give the platform this sort of worn look. I've used this technique when weathering my Gundam models back in the day, so it was a great feeling bringing this technique back. So back to fixing the gold. I'm going to clean up some of the unwanted paint using a Q-tip dipped in Magic Clean kitchen cleaner. This stuff works great for removing acrylic paint over a lacquer surface, almost like how you would remove enamel paint using enamel thinner. There's no risk of damaging my lacquer paint below like there would be with isopropyl alcohol. Yeah, this looks much better, and looks exactly how I hoped it would. Now that the base is finished, I can finally move on to assembling the model. I want to take a moment to acknowledge the amazing reception the channel has received since I launched my first video 3 months ago. At the time of writing, my Goku video is sitting at almost 10,000 views, and the Zoro video beyond that has passed 15,000 views, which is insane. And 1,000 subscribers? I'm truly humbled. So a genuine thank you from me. I'm even more motivated now than ever to paint models. If you enjoyed the video, let's connect. Leave a comment telling me what you liked about the video and what I can still improve upon. I'm no expert by any means. I'm still very much a learner. These videos aren't how to do it, but more so showing you how I did it. I'm constantly learning and trying new things, and these videos will be my outlet to show you part of my journey of learning. And if I teach you something along the way, even better. I also have a special shout out to my patrons whose names are scrolling across the screen right now. You guys' support means the world to me. One final shout out goes to Arkevs 3D, the sculptor of the model. One thing I really loved about this model is how Arkevs brought Akira Toriyama's official illustration of the character to the third dimension. This is a fantastic recreation of that illustration, so kudos to you. It was an honor to paint your sculpt. Well, all that's left now is the sizzle reel. Be well.